Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's Chris, and today we got something a little bit different. I figured that we would go through a list of what I feel are the 10 best action figure lines of all time. Obviously, since there's only 10 slots here, not all the lines that I think are great are going to make it in there. Some of my absolute favorites aren't on the list. However, I do believe that the ones that I chose to put on the list are the most iconic and quite possibly the true game changers or pioneers of certain aspects within the toy industry as a whole. I think that it would be really fun if we can, as a community, down below in the comment section, make a list of honorable mentions. Because like I said, there's a ton of stuff that I absolutely love that's not even on here. So I think that that would be a fun way to boost engagement. Speaking of which, if you find yourself stumbling across this video and onto this channel, and you like the content that's featured here, if you could do me a favor and hit the like button, the subscribe button if you have not done so already, leave a comment for the algorithm, and then share the video with some of your friends that like the same type of stuff. That way we could hopefully grow this channel and make it into something awesome. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start this list off with the number 10 spot, which just so happens to be Star Wars. The very first Star Wars action figures were released way back in 1978 and were actually part of an early bird mail-away kit. The set included Star Wars figures of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and R2-D2. Then eventually the first 12 figures within the line fully released. They were being sold for a whopping $1.97.
It's a trap!
And that amazing price point made it really difficult for Kenner to keep up with the overall demand. Nowadays, the line is still ongoing, both with the retro wave as well as modern versions of all of these figures and characters. And on top of all of that, they really changed the game with their scale of action figure. That 3 3/4 inch scale was unheard of and unseen at that time. And it really made waves within the toy industry as well as the overall consumer side, and made a lot of brands not only take notice, but pay attention in a way that it made them almost mimic some of the things that they were doing. Now at number 9, Masters of the Universe. This toy line was introduced in 1982, even though the line itself was created by Mattel way back in 1981, and the action figures were 5.5 inches tall. They were big, burly, bulky, just absolute awesomeness made into plastic. It was definitely a departure from the popular line Star Wars, which we just talked about, which featured those 3-inch or so figures. But either way, this line is very surprising because the show in and of itself hasn't really been in the consumer zeitgeist for a while. There have been different variations of the TV series. There's currently a brand new one now on Netflix, but it's not like something like Ninja Turtles or G.I. Joe where it's been refreshed or revamped every so often. So it's really cool to see that the line has really stood the test of time, especially right now, where the people working at the brand are people like us that grew up loving and really enjoying this show, to the point to where we're getting brand new versions of these characters in what they call the Origin series with updated articulation, but they still match the original look or theme of those original action figures. And on top of that, this brand new series, which is the cartoon collection, finally sees these action figures looking exactly like their cartoon counterparts. Now at number 8, Mattel and Marvel team up to create the Secret Wars line. This is actually Marvel's first true plastic action figure, and I'm not talking about stuff with soft goods, I'm talking about full-on plastic action figures. It was a very short-lived line. It only went from 1984 through 1985. It was both comprised of action figures and play sets, and it was kind of a first of its kind where it was a direct tie-in to an upcoming comic book series that Marvel was going to be creating and releasing to the public. So the reason why I think that this is such an important or an iconic line within action figure history is just because the figures itself were literally made as an ad to the source material. And yes, the line was definitely a reaction to Kenner's DC superpowers, but we'll talk about them in just a moment. But an action figure line that was set up as an ad to an upcoming comic is kind of an interesting way of doing things. It's almost being replicated now within the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where a lot of the newer generation are seeing these characters and falling in love with them on the big screen first, and then going back and deep diving and seeing where their comic book origins began. I think it's a really cool full circle moment where, you know, that type of media, whether it be action figures, movies, whatever, trading cards, really keeps the overall genre alive. At number 7, we've got Toy Biz's XMen Series. This line is one of my absolute personal favorites. It debuted in 1991. It ended all the way in 1998. I mean, that's a solid run right there for a, you know, action figure line overall. And it's just a very interesting toy line in general because they took what G.I. Joe and Kenner's DC superpowers sort of began with the action feature, and they really ran with it, but they added in comic book accuracy, along with a little bit of articulation. Also, a game changer for the toy industry, at least at the time, was that they introduced the comic book's current storylines into the figures themselves. So we were able to see multiple different variations of these characters without things being repetitive. And yes, I'm looking at you, Batman line, even though it's awesome in and of itself, but that's exactly why you won't see the Batman line featured on this list, even though it should be an honorable mention. But every release was like, hey look, it's Batman. Oh, it's Batman. Did you need another Batman? Why, yes, we did. And because they were pulling from different versions of these characters from different eras, we were able to get multiple different looks, again, without things feeling repetitive. Wolverine's a great example of that. We got the brown suit, we got the yellow tiger stripe suit, we got Logan, we got the spy suit, we got the training suit, we got Weapon X, we even got Age of Apocalypse, and many more. Now at number 6, Kenner's Superpowers. This was another short-lived line. It ran from 84 all the way to 86, but that line really emphasized the action feature. Every character pretty much had one, and they all coincided with their powers themselves. It was so cool, dude. Like, this was one of the coolest sets I think ever, and I think it really paved the way for what that Toy Biz X-Men series ended up taking and then really running with it. At number 5, it's Migo. These are figures that are definitely not within my childhood or anything. I don't really have a nostalgic tie to these things. However, I do think that they're important because they're commonly known as the father of the action figure. Not only that, they also used licensing to its full advantage, where they were able to produce DC stuff, Marvel stuff, all within the same scale. Yes, they don't look as cool as modern day action figures. The company was founded in 1954, and when they finally made these specific figures, it was around the 70s, but I still think that they are iconic, legendary, and belong on the list. I mean, without Migo, who knows where action figures would have ended up eventually. Number 4, we've got Transformers, robots in disguise. I mean, come on, who doesn't like this? Not only that, it was like getting 2 different figures or toys all in one. You had a vehicle that transformed into a character. The series began, at least in the US, in 1984, and as most of us already know, they were taking designs that were already made and established from Japan and just kind of rebranding them for Western markets. It's something that we would later see within another popular toy line and TV show series or franchise, whatever you want to call it, commonly known as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And that is another one that I really wanted it on this list, but it doesn't fit. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely an honorable mention. But Transformers, it's one of the most sophisticated toy lines of all time. Remembering how to transform them from one thing to another was probably the biggest problem. But it's a line that's so iconic that, like all the rest of the lines featured on this list, they have stood the test of time. They are still on toy shelves right now. Multiple iterations for all generations. It's so awesome to see. At number 3, we've got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, one of my personal favorites. Definitely one of the most nostalgic for me personally. It debuted in 1988, and the action figures only really happened because they were able to sign a deal where there was going to be a coinciding cartoon television series, which most of us grew up on. It's really cool to see something that started off as a comic book parody really become a global phenomenon. And like a lot of the stuff on this list, there are multiple generations or variations of these things for all generations, and it's just so fun to see, especially as somebody like myself where I have kids, and each one of my kids are 2 different generations, and each of them have their own version of Ninja Turtles, including myself. So being able to share stuff like this with them is like one of the biggest cool things I can ever experience as a parent. Now at number 2 is Toy Biz's Marvel Legends. This series was introduced in 2002, and while I was already a collector of action figures, I've been collecting action figures way longer than anything else. A lot of people might know me as somebody that is a shoe or sneaker person. I definitely, have my fair share of those. We have our own channel called Wear Testers where we review them, but long before that, I was buying and collecting action figures. I would always have them displayed on my shelves, and once Marvel Legends came into play, this was right after I graduated high school, that to me really changed things up. Like, they made action figures for grown-ups essentially. Not only that, they were an amalgam of everything that we've kind of seen on this list. They came with display bases, they came with comic books that coincided with the characters inside the box. They were highly detailed and articulated. There was multiple variations that matched their comic book counterparts. They even introduced the Build-A-Figure. I mean, that's like a hot ticket item, even right now. And even after they got bought out by Hasbro way back in 2006, Hasbro's really been able to take things up and just keep things going. Consumer interest in this specific line is probably at an all-time high today, with unveils happening via live stream, YouTube reviews galore. I mean, tell me, Marvel Legends might be one of the most popular action figure series ever. And at number 1, we have G.I. Joe. This is the first actual toy marketed as an action figure. Remember,
Lord Helmet, what? You need it on the bridge, sir. Knock on my door, knock next time. time! Yes, sir. Did you see anything? No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again.
It's not a doll, it's an action figure. They debuted way back in 1964 in 12-inch form, but they were actually refreshed or rebranded in 1982 at the 3 3/4 inch scale. So again, going all the way back, coming full circle with the number 10 spot and Star Wars, G.I. Joe took what that brand established and they freaking ran with it. They created 3 3/4 inch action figures that were fairly detailed, especially within their sculpts. I think that that's highly detailed at their size at any rate, and extremely articulated. We're talking about the 80s here, and these action figures can move in almost any direction that you could want them to, at least as a kid in the 80s. Yes, Marvel Legends is greater, and so are all of these new modern brands, but without G.I. Joe's 3 3/4 inch action figures, I don't know if we would get action figures that were fully articulated like they are today. And again, they use things that were just amazing from all these other brands. We're talking about playsets, vehicles, the figures themselves. G.I. Joe might still have the record for the largest playset of all time. G.I. Joe is just freaking amazing. And that pretty much takes care of the list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that it was fun, kind of like rolling through our childhood, reminiscing about the good old days. And again, if you guys wanted to help me out and create a honorable mentions list down below, I guess I'll start it off. Power Rangers. That would be like the first one, at least on my mind. Thank you guys so much for everything. I really appreciate you guys. I will see you guys on the next one. So until then, stay nerdy, my friends.